Let's begin. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth. At 2:17 a.m., the Collins mansion stood unnaturally silent, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Rain lashed against the tall glass windows, each drop striking with quiet fury, blurring the city lights beyond. Inside, the air felt heavy, tense, unfinished. On the marble kitchen counter lay Ava Collins' phone, its screen cracked from a fall, an unsent message still glowing faintly. The words ended mid-sentence, as if her fingers had frozen before she could press send. Beside the phone rested her wedding ring, carefully placed, not dropped in haste but removed with deliberate calm. Partially tucked beneath it was an ultrasound photo, folded once, the outline of a tiny life barely visible under the kitchen light. Near the front door stood a half-packed suitcase. One shoe lay beside it, the other missing. Ava's coat was still hanging on the rack, untouched, as though she had never planned to return for it. The house showed no signs of struggle, no broken furniture, no forced doors. Yet something about the stillness felt wrong, unsettling, like the aftermath of a storm that no one had witnessed. Later, neighbors would recall that night with uneasy guilt. One woman remembered waking briefly to the sound of rain and thinking she heard a woman cry out, soft, desperate, quickly swallowed by the storm. Another neighbor mentioned seeing a light flicker on and off in the Collins kitchen sometime after midnight. No one called the police. No one checked. By morning, Ava Collins was gone. Her car remained in the driveway. Her purse was still upstairs. Her passport sat untouched in a drawer. It was as if she had stepped out of her life and vanished into the rain itself. Miles away, the truth slept peacefully behind velvet curtains. In a luxury hotel suite downtown, warm light spilled across silk sheets and empty champagne glasses. Ethan Collins lay back against the pillows, laughing freely, his tie discarded on the floor. Beside him, Lena traced lazy circles on his chest, her laughter blending with the soft hum of the city below. They toasted to freedom, to new beginnings, to a future that no longer included Ava. The world beyond the suite felt distant, unimportant. Ethan's phone buzzed once on the nightstand. He ignored it. They had no idea that, at that very moment, Ava's name was already being whispered in quiet panic, that her absence had begun to carve a hollow space no one could yet understand. They didn't know that the woman they believed was weak had walked away with more than heartbreak. They didn't know that the silence she left behind would soon become deafening. They believed she ran away, they had no idea she vanished with the truth, and a child. To the outside world, Ethan Collins was everything a husband was supposed to be. He smiled easily at charity galas, held doors open, spoke proudly about his wife in interviews, and wore success like it was effortless. People admired his ambition, his confidence, the polished image of a man who had built everything from nothing. Standing beside him, Ava was often described as lucky. But inside their home, the truth was painfully different. To Ava, Ethan was distant, sharp-edged, and emotionally cruel in ways that left no bruises but constant wounds. His warmth vanished behind closed doors. Conversations felt like obligations. Compliments were rare, affection even rarer. When Ava told him she was pregnant, hoping it might soften something in him, his reaction was brief and restrained, more inconvenience than joy flickering across his face. As her pregnancy progressed, Ethan began to drift further away. Late nights at the office became routine. Business trips appeared without warning. His phone was always face down, always locked. When Ava asked questions, she was met with sighs and irritation, as if her concern were a burden he no longer had time to carry. Slowly, the signs crept in, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Messages disappeared from his phone before she could read them. An unfamiliar perfume lingered on his jackets, sweet and expensive, nothing like her own. Conversations stopped abruptly when Ava entered a room, laughter dying mid-sentence, eyes shifting away from hers. She began to feel like a stranger in her own marriage, like a guest overstaying her welcome. Still, she told herself she was imagining things. Pregnancy hormones, exhaustion, fear, anything was easier than accepting the truth. The truth found her anyway. One night, unable to sleep, Ava walked past Ethan's study and heard his voice lowered in laughter. He was on the phone. She paused without meaning to, her hand resting against the wall as she listened. A woman's voice responded on the other end, soft, playful, intimate. Ava's chest tightened as she realized this wasn't business. This was personal. Then Ethan said it. "She's pregnant, not irreplaceable." The words landed like a physical blow. Ava felt the room tilt, her breath catching painfully in her throat. He laughed after saying it, as if it were clever, as if her body, her child, her sacrifice were nothing more than an inconvenience in his carefully planned life. She backed away silently, pressing a hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. In their bedroom, Ava closed the door and slid down against it, tears finally spilling, but not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly, endlessly, as if something inside her were breaking beyond repair. She cried until there was nothing left. Then, slowly, something changed. That night, Ava stopped asking questions. She stopped hoping for apologies that would never come. She stopped waiting for love that no longer existed. As dawn crept through the curtains, her tears dried, replaced by a calm she had never felt before. She didn't want to fight, she didn't want explanations, she didn't want to beg for a place in a life that had already erased her. She wanted to disappear. After Ava's disappearance, it didn't take long for Lena to step fully into the life that had never truly been hers. The police called it a missing persons case, the media whispered theories, and neighbors watched with quiet curiosity as Lena began arriving at the Collins mansion not as a guest, but as someone who belonged there. Within weeks, her clothes filled Ava's closet. Her toiletries lined the bathroom shelves. Her laughter echoed through rooms that had once been painfully silent. At first, Lena felt victorious. She slept in Ava's bed, stretching out across the expensive sheets as if claiming a prize. She wore Ava's dresses, admiring how perfectly they fit, telling herself it was proof she had one. She walked through the house slowly, fingers brushing along walls and furniture, already imagining redecorations, already thinking of the mansion as hers. This was the life she believed she deserved. Yet from the very beginning, something felt wrong. The house never felt welcoming. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was watchful. At night, Lena found it hard to sleep. The air felt heavy, as if it carried memories that refused to fade. Sometimes she would wake suddenly, heart racing, convinced someone had been standing beside the bed. Ethan brushed it off as stress, but Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone. Strange things began happening. A faint scent of Ava's favorite perfume lingered in empty rooms, appearing without explanation. Lena would stop mid-step, confused, inhaling slowly, certain she recognized it. She searched the house for the source, but found nothing. The scent would vanish as suddenly as it appeared. In the bedroom, there was a locked drawer in the vanity that refused to open. No matter how many keys Lena tried, it remained sealed. The resistance unsettled her more than she cared to admit. She began avoiding the vanity altogether, uneasy with the thought of what Ava might have hidden inside. Then came the notes. The first one appeared on the kitchen counter one morning, placed neatly beside the coffee machine. Lena froze when she saw it. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, familiar, and not hers. The date at the top made her stomach twist. It was dated 3 days after Ava disappeared. The note read simply, "You look comfortable." Lena laughed it off at first, convincing herself Ethan must be playing a cruel joke. But more notes appeared. One on the nightstand. Another slipped inside a book. Each one dated after Ava's disappearance. Each one calm, deliberate, intentional. The final note was waiting for her on the pillow one evening. "I know you're here." Lena's breath caught. Her hands trembled as she dropped the paper. For the first time since Ava vanished, Lena felt something she couldn't control or explain. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was fear. The love Ethan and Lena believed would flourish in Ava's absence began to rot under the weight of fear and suspicion. What once felt thrilling and forbidden now felt fragile, unstable, and poisoned by the silence Ava had left behind. The house that was supposed to mark the beginning of their new life became the place where everything started to fall apart. Ethan changed first. He began checking the doors repeatedly, even in the middle of the day, pulling on the handles as if expecting someone to burst through them. At night, he paced the halls, listening for sounds that weren't there. Sleep came in short, broken stretches, and when he woke, it was often with a sharp gasp, his body drenched in sweat. He snapped at Lena for small things, misplaced keys, lights left on, questions he didn't want to answer. The confident man she once admired now seemed hollowed out by something he refused to name. Lena watched him unravel, her own unease tightening into something darker. The victories she once felt curdled into guilt, and guilt slowly transformed into terror. The notes, the perfume, the locked drawer, none of it felt accidental anymore. She began to wonder if Ava had ever truly left, or if she was being punished in ways she couldn't see. Then the police returned. What had once been treated as a simple disappearance was suddenly reopened with urgency. Investigators informed Ethan that new information had come to light, details that suggested Ava's vanishing had been anything but impulsive. Financial records revealed that Ava had legally transferred money from joint accounts in the weeks before she disappeared, careful and methodical, leaving no trace of wrongdoing. It wasn't theft. It was preparation. Worse still, authorities discovered a scheduled email, set to be released weeks after her disappearance, programmed to send itself if certain conditions were met. The contents were still sealed, but the intent was clear. Ava had planned to speak even after she was gone. The final blow came from her medical records. Ava had been pregnant. The room seemed to tilt as the truth settled in. Ethan's anger turned sharp and defensive, while Lena felt her chest tighten painfully. The disappearance was no longer just about a wife walking away. It involved a child, a life that should have bound them together but instead exposed everything they had destroyed. A detective watched Ethan carefully before delivering the words that shattered any remaining illusion of control. "Your wife didn't disappear emotionally," he said calmly. "She planned everything." The sentence echoed long after the officer left. In that moment, Ethan understood something he had been trying desperately to deny. Ava hadn't vanished in weakness or despair. She had left with intention, with clarity, and with a purpose none of them could yet see. And whatever she had planned, it was far from over. Ethan and Lena had convinced themselves that Ava's disappearance had been sudden, chaotic, and driven by emotion. They believed she had fled in a panic, perhaps hoping to punish them or escape a life she no longer wanted. What they found instead was meticulous, deliberate, and chilling in its precision. Ava had left a trail, a digital breadcrumb path, meant to reveal the truth only when they were desperate enough to uncover it. It began with a folder on a secure cloud account Ethan had long forgotten existed. Curious, frustrated, and terrified in equal measure, Lena opened it first. The first file was an audio recording. The voice was unmistakably Ava's, calm, deliberate, and composed. She spoke of the countless nights Ethan had ignored her, the subtle ways he demeaned her, the laughter she heard on phone calls meant for someone else. Each word struck like a physical blow. Ethan's smooth public persona, the charming businessman who smiled for cameras, was exposed as cold, manipulative, and cruel. Lena listened in horror as Ava described the affair she had already known about, proof that Lena had never been innocent. More files followed. Bank statements, emails, and schedules revealed just how calculated Ava's plan had been. She had methodically prepared for her disappearance, moving money legally, setting automatic emails, and documenting everything for posterity. It became clear that Ava had anticipated Ethan's arrogance, Lena's complicity, and the assumptions of everyone who believed she was powerless. Then came the final piece, a video diary recorded weeks before her disappearance. Ava sat in the soft morning light, her posture relaxed, her expression serene. There was no anger, no tears, no pleading. She looked directly into the camera as if speaking to two people in the room, her eyes sharp and unyielding. "If you're watching this," she said, her voice steady, "I'm already free, and my child is safe." Ethan froze, his mind struggling to process what she had just said. His pulse quickened. He had assumed Ava's absence was temporary, that she would panic in return when confronted with the reality of her disappearance. But her words carried a weight that made it impossible to deny. Ava had not left alone. She had not run without reason. She had planned this carefully, calmly, and with one ultimate purpose in mind. The truth hit Ethan like a fist to the stomach. Ava was gone, but she wasn't just gone, she had vanished pregnant. The idea that she carried life within her while stepping out of his world brought a sense of panic he could not control. Every step of her plan, every recording, every note and email, had been designed to protect that life while exposing them. Lena stared at the screen, pale and trembling. She realized, with a sinking dread, that Ava had known her, had known Ethan, and had anticipated their every move. They had not been clever. They had not been in control. They had been outmaneuvered, outwitted, and outclassed by a woman they believed powerless. For the first time, Ethan truly understood the depth of his failure, not just as a husband, but as a man who had underestimated the courage, foresight, and determination of the woman he had thought he could break. Ava's disappearance was more than absence. It was strategy, foresight, and the deliberate creation of a future he could no longer touch. And in that moment, Ethan realized that Ava had not only escaped herself, she had ensured that the life she carried would escape them too. The moment Ava's carefully preserved evidence came to light, it ignited a firestorm that Ethan and Lena were unprepared to face. Within hours, social media accounts lit up with leaked clips, transcribed recordings, and screenshots that revealed a side of Ethan Collins no one had ever seen publicly. The man who smiled at charity galas, who posed for magazine covers with his perfect wife, was suddenly exposed as cruel, manipulative, and emotionally abusive. Headlines screamed his betrayal, painting a portrait of a husband who had treated the woman carrying his child as disposable. Lena, too, found herself under the unforgiving glare of the public eye. For years, she had imagined herself the clever, untouchable mistress, someone who could claim happiness without consequence. But the truth had a way of cutting deeper than any lover's betrayal could. She was not framed as innocent or misled, she was cast as a willing participant, complicit in Ethan's cruelty, a woman who had stepped knowingly into another's marriage and destroyed it further. Comments, shares, and whispers spread faster than she could respond. Every friend she had counted on began to withdraw, unsure how to reconcile the woman they knew with the image painted by Ava's meticulous evidence. Consequences unfolded like clockwork. Ethan was suspended from his company within days, and internal investigations confirmed that his public image was no longer tenable. Investors and board members distanced themselves, leaving him professionally isolated. The man who had once wielded authority like a weapon was stripped of control, forced to confront a world that saw him exactly as Ava had recorded him. Lena, too, felt the weight of public judgment. Her social circles evaporated almost overnight. Invitations stopped coming. Opportunities vanished. Even the carefully curated image of her as sophisticated and untouchable crumbled under scrutiny. For the first time, she experienced a fear deeper than shame, an awareness that every choice she had made had led to irreversible consequences. Yet while Ethan and Lena floundered, the public's attention increasingly turned to Ava. She became a symbol of silent resilience, a woman who had vanished at a critical moment in her life to protect herself and her unborn child. Sympathy, respect, and a sense of awe followed every story and speculation about her. People who had never met her now understood the courage it had taken to leave behind a life defined by betrayal and fear. Then came the shocking report that made headlines internationally. Airport security footage captured a woman resembling Ava, months after her disappearance, walking calmly through a foreign terminal. She moved with purpose, serene and unhurried, a small suitcase in hand, her presence commanding no attention yet radiating undeniable strength. The image sparked an explosion of speculation. Had she fled the country? Was she safe? And most importantly, had she truly disappeared, or was she orchestrating the next part of her plan from afar? For Ethan and Lena, the world had become unrecognizable. The lives they had imagined for themselves had collapsed into ruin, all because they underestimated a woman they thought they controlled. Meanwhile, Ava, pregnant, determined, untouchable, was already a step ahead, living on her own terms and watching as the world slowly realized the power of her absence. Months passed in a blur of fear, shame, and sleepless nights for Ethan and Lena. Every day seemed to stretch longer than the last, each hour marked by tension, paranoia, and the gnawing awareness that Ava was always one step ahead. They had tried to piece together her movements, scoured financial records, and interrogated their own assumptions, but nothing had prepared them for what arrived one ordinary morning, unannounced, at the Collins residence. The package was small, neatly wrapped in plain brown paper, with no return address. A simple strip of tape held it together, yet the aura surrounding it made their hands tremble even before opening it. Ethan's face was pale, Lena's lips pressed into a thin, tight line. The air in the room seemed heavier, charged with anticipation and fear. Ethan hesitated for a moment before carefully cutting the tape. Inside, the contents were deliberate, purposeful, and devastating in their clarity. The first item was divorce papers, already signed and finalized. The document bore official seals and timestamps, leaving no room for argument or delay. It was a statement, cold and precise, that their marriage was over, without confrontation, without negotiation, without the chance to beg, reason, or argue. Beneath the papers lay a small key, attached to a simple leather fob. Ethan turned it over in his hand, bewildered. A beach house? He had no idea what it referred to. Lena's eyes widened as she realized it was another calculated move by Ava, an entirely new life waiting somewhere they could never touch. The key was a message in itself: freedom had been built, tangible and untouchable, a life separate from the ruins Ethan and Lena had created. Finally, there was a handwritten letter on thick cream stationery. The handwriting was unmistakable, Ava's elegant, flowing script, calm yet commanding. Lena reached for it hesitantly, but Ethan snatched it first, reading aloud as his voice shook slightly. "I didn't disappear because I was weak. I left because my daughter deserved a life without fear. I have lived in silence to protect what you could not. Every step you took to control me only confirmed what I already knew: the life I wanted could never exist under your shadow. I am gone, but I am free. And my child will grow up in a world defined by love, not cruelty." The words hit them like a thunderclap. Ethan's jaw tightened. Lena's breath caught in her throat. There was no room for manipulation, no way to twist the meaning. Ava had planned everything: her disappearance, her protection of their child, and her complete autonomy. The truth was undeniable: she had given birth, and she had chosen freedom for herself and her daughter over the empty comfort of a life with them. Ethan felt an unfamiliar pang of helplessness, the kind that comes from realizing the power someone else holds over your fate. Lena's face reflected a mix of fear, guilt, and awe. Ava had disappeared, but she had not fled in panic or despair. She had acted with clarity, strength, and unwavering intent. As they stared at the letter, the papers, and the key, it became painfully clear: the life they had thought was theirs to control had already been reclaimed and rewritten by the woman they had underestimated. Ava was gone, but more importantly, she was victorious, and the life she carried, and nurtured, was untouchable, free from the shadows of Ethan and Lena forever. The sun had just begun to rise over the tranquil shoreline, casting a warm, golden glow across the soft sand. The waves lapped gently at the shore, their rhythm steady and soothing, carrying with them the sense of a world untouched by the chaos Ava had left behind. She stood barefoot on the beach, the cool grains of sand sinking beneath her feet, and in her arms lay the most precious thing she had ever held: her newborn baby girl. The infant's tiny hands curled instinctively, clinging to her mother's chest, while her soft, rhythmic breathing seemed to harmonize perfectly with the ocean behind them. Ava looked down at her daughter, her eyes softening in ways that no one back home would ever witness. There was no fear, no doubt, no shadow of the past lingering in her gaze. Only peace. Only the profound certainty that she had made the right choice. Every calculated step, every careful plan that had led her to this moment, all of it had been for her child, for the life they would share far away from the cruelty and betrayal that had once defined her existence. The baby stirred lightly, a tiny whimper escaping her lips, and Ava smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. She whispered, barely audible over the gentle roar of the waves, "You will never grow up watching your mother beg for love." The words carried with them a promise, a shield of protection against the kind of pain she herself had endured. In that instant, the weight of all her fear, anger, and sorrow lifted, replaced with a serenity she had never known. Far away, in a world that had once seemed to belong entirely to him, Ethan Collins sat alone in his empty home, the walls echoing with the absence of everything he had taken for granted. His reputation lay in ruins, the media exposing every detail of his abuse and betrayal. Colleagues and friends had turned away, and even the life he had built around his wealth and influence now felt hollow and meaningless. He was left to confront the consequences of underestimating Ava, the woman he thought he could control, the one whose departure had dismantled everything he held dear. Lena, too, struggled in her new reality. The world had not been kind, and she carried the weight of guilt and shame like an ever-present shadow. Opportunities she had once taken for granted had vanished. Friends she had relied on abandoned her. The thrill of her affair had transformed into a constant reminder of choices she could never undo. She survived, but she lived with the quiet, gnawing knowledge that her complicity had cost her more than she could ever reclaim. Back on the beach, Ava shifted slightly, cradling her daughter closer, feeling the steady warmth of life she had protected. The sun continued its slow climb, illuminating the horizon in streaks of rose and gold. With every gentle wave, every soft gust of wind, she felt a profound sense of victory, not over Ethan or Lena, but over the fear and helplessness that had once defined her. And in that peaceful moment, the story reached its final, undeniable truth. She didn't just vanish, she escaped, and saved her daughter's future. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth.